Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah. So I'm surprised to be up here. Hugh asked me to say a few words, and I know we're all going to dinner, but I'm not here to talk about dinner. I'm here to talk about breakfast. And I get the breakfast down there in the conversation in Berlin. It's connected to the first point, which is, what do I do? You ask me, what do I do? Because I'm neither a scientist nor an engineer. There are only two of us, I think, from Washington here at this meeting, which is quite incredible. And I own a monopoly right now in Washington. It's called Advocacy for Geoengineering Research. Billions of dollars are spent in Washington, I think, on lobbying, trying to create programs. Geoengineering research has a very small voice. So I've been in the climate field for many decades, and one of the holes in the field is that in the policy community, there's nobody advocating for a research program. There's scientists out around the country, but day to day trying to move the executive branch of the United States, the Congress, the stakeholders. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. So that's a project I have, and it relates a bit to our breakfast. The second project I have is related to the chairmanship of the Arctic Council, which changes hands in a month. The United States takes over from Canada. And what's the relationship of that to what we're doing? I think I suggested in one of my comments, but let me be clearer. This is a historic moment. And we're all here in a sense in a context we've never been here before. Nothing like this, nothing of this scale have sort of the political systems of the world had to confront. So it's a unique moment. Now, the U.S. takes over the chairmanship at a unique moment in the Arctic. My term is unraveling. If you look at Greenland, the Canadian-Alaskan glaciers, the permafrost, the snow extent, and sea ice, they're all headed south, so to speak. So here we are, U.S., what do we do with that? And at least our government has said we are going to focus on the climate change in the Arctic, and we're going to communicate what's going on. That has been a decision. Now, why is that related to what we're up to? Because if you look at the drivers in the political community for wanting to know if we have any answers, if we have any tools, and what the risks are, you need the really two big drivers. One may be the Arctic. In fact, the National Academy of Sciences report on research needs in the Arctic clearly stated that the geoengineering issue could emerge out of the Arctic, and we needed to have answers. So I think this is going to be a 2-year chairmanship. The end of it comes the first big climate meeting of the next President of the United States in early 2017. And I think that's actually potentially a big moment, because if the signals from the Arctic continue to decline as they are, it only gets bigger. Diversity in politics. This is a comment I wanted to make about the meeting. I thought it was marvelous, just a marvelous meeting. And I think what you managed to do was have so many diverse voices about this topic from all angles. And you kind of weaved in the politics. And that was very rich, because the politics are such an integral part of this. Transparency, the debate, last night's panel. This is not just an issue for the wonderful engineers and scientists who are here, but for, I have hundreds of colleagues in the climate field who know nothing about this. They are all advocates. They have to learn. They are participants. And if you want to go up on Capitol Hill and talk about this, the knowledge level is even, well, you wouldn't be overly impressed. But the National Academy report, I think, was a big step forward, and what was most important about it was its statement that we needed a research program. Now the question is whether we can stand up a research program in the U.S. government. And most of the problem is not that John Holdren, our science advisor, thinks it ought to be done. It's a political problem. Two fears. The NGO community, the sort of political correctness problem, which is changing. And the other is the global negotiation framework, because U.S., as I was a former negotiator on climate change for the U.S., we can't stand up a program as we head into Paris, because if it's a big public event, I think the politics of it don't work for the administration, because others will just say we're trying to sabotage something, even though we're not. So, but there is this, you've got to manage the political problem, and I think it's all, this meeting is a real contribution to legitimizing and taking the whole question out of the realm of political incorrectness. And you know, when I go back to Washington, I kind of take this meeting with me, and it gives me a much better voice in saying, we really have to do this. And you kind of feel much more comfortable with it, and it's much more legitimate. Now, back to the lobbying and the conversation in Berlin. And this is, when you're not a scientist or an engineer, you come to this meeting and you say, well, what do I have to add? Can I actually raise the issues or open my mouth? And I get, it's hard to believe, but there's a certain reluctance. So, the wonderful thing that happened in Berlin, you know, when you come to a meeting, you're alone, do you get any companionship, or am I going to eat breakfast alone? So I sit down at breakfast at a great meeting in Berlin, and Ken comes along, he sits down, and Hugh comes along, I've never met, he sits down, and we start having this wonderful conversation, first about what Ken would say in his opening speech. But then with Hugh, I think we did this 2 or 3 times. At one point he said, he started to complain very loudly. Very loudly. He said, there aren't enough engineers here. We have no voice. You know, we are really important to this, and we need to be heard. I'm now, you know, embellishing just a little bit. So here's where my lobbying skill comes in. I said, Hugh, you can bring the world to Cambridge. He said, I agree. So here we are. Thank you. Okay. So I have another job to thank all the wonderful people who put this together. The venue, the logistics, the communications, the warm reception. I thank you. It's really been marvelous. So I am here to declare the conference closed.